LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 2nd edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's dozen best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. There's no HBO Real Time with Bill Maher this week, no Saturday Night Live, so the political comedy source I'm going to use is actually a clip I saw on MSNBC's AM Joy this morning, a little sort of stand-up comedy from former head of the Republican Party, Michael Steele, which, like the rest of the clips, come from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. Of course, MSNBC is really part of NBC. If you want to see the topic I'm covering, it's in the title, it's down in the video description. It's Trump Rebuked. And the dozen clips, there's also a link down in the video description to my clip list, which you can read and figure out who's speaking in which clip and generally what it's about. You'll see most of it, the Trump rebuke topic is about the McCain funeral and some of the speakers, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Meghan McCain, all took what some call oblique swipes or veiled swipes at Donald Trump, and I actually decided I was going to make the title of the video Trump Rebuked before I watched the shows this morning, and they used the word rebuked in every show, in a clip from every show except for Fox News Sunday, where the word rebuke didn't come up till the panel discussion and much softer coverage of the rebuke of Donald Trump from the funeral. And then the future rebuke that hopefully will be coming up is represented by the couple clips I have at the end of the mayor of Tallahassee, Andrew Gillum, who just got the Democratic nomination to run for governor of Florida. He was kind of an upset victory, and he's being painted as like a left-wing socialist by some, and there was this whole controversy about his Republican opponent, who's sort of like a mini-Trump, Ron DeSantis, saying that he was articulate and that he was going to monkey up the Florida economy, and that caused like this whole racism thing. And so those will be the last two clips. Most of the clips, though, are about the rebuke of Trumpism at this McCain funeral. But the political comedy clip that I have promised you is actually talking about the whole Andrew Gillum thing. And later I'll show you a clip of what Ron DeSantis said about Andrew Gillum. I told you basically that he called him articulate, which is kind of a racial code word, and also the whole monkey up thing, which I've never even heard that phrase before. But in terms of articulate being a racial code word, that was kind of the joke in the 40-second introduction to this panel discussion on AM Joy with Reid and, like I said, former head of the Republican Party, Michael Steele, talking for about 40 seconds in this political comedy clip from this morning here.
The board, I'm going to give honorific to Chairman Steele. Your thoughts on this Gillum campaign and this kind of trite narrative that, you know, to be fair, your party, as well as my profession, the media, are putting on top of him?
Well, he's just so articulate, and I'm just so damn
so
impressed by that. And he presents so well. And
yeah.
Gosh, he had a tie on and everything. Damn. Black man in a tie. Look at this brother here, right? All right. Anyway, so. Okay.
Put up, tip your waiters. Always get count on. That's why I went to you first, brother. I knew you were going to come with it. Yeah.
Well, you know, look.
So that was you saw Reid say, do the ba-dump bump, don't forget to tip your waitresses. I go to a lot of comedy clubs, so I don't know, was that stand-up comedy, quality comedy from Michael Steele? He does have the distinction of being the only chair of the Republican Party who was portrayed by a Muppet on The Daily Show. That was one of my favorite Michael Steele moments, and then there was even like an interaction between the real Michael Steele and the Muppet, so I guess he does have a good sense of humor. Or you can tell me what you think down in the comment section. Now I'm going to get to the actual news clips, and you'll, like I said, at the end of the video, the last two clips are going to be Andrew Gillum, clips of Andrew Gillum. He was on a couple different shows, and that will include an introduction that shows exactly what his opponent Ron DeSantis said, but that's like clips 11 and 12 right before the bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end for the Dash and Sandy fans out there. But now I want to get to news summaries of the rebuke of Donald Trump, mainly through the McCain funeral, from all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets. Even Face the Nation sometimes doesn't do news summaries, and even Fox News did a news summary that sort of touched on the rebuke. The Fox News is the only one that doesn't actually use the word rebuke, and I think the best one actually wasn't NBC's Meet the Press. It might actually be ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that I'm showing second, because it really puts it in context, but more in context than the NBC Meet the Press news summary I'm about to show you. But this one has the virtue of using the phrase the Trump being rebuked much earlier in the clip. You have to wait much longer in the ABC clip. The ABC clip, the phrase they use at the beginning, it was like emotionally admonished. Maybe I should have made that my title. That's way too long. Like Trump emotionally admonished. No. Rebuked. He was rebuked. And that's something that you'll hear from Chuck Todd in the summary from the beginning of NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
Good morning and a happy Labor Day weekend to everyone. What we saw yesterday at the National Cathedral was more than a funeral for John McCain. It was also a longing for what many fear is a lost era of American politics, an era when we could agree that there's more that unites us than divides us. It was, in other words, unmistakably a rebuke of Donald Trump's presidency and style of politics that he's brought to Washington. Though President Trump's name was never mentioned, John McCain made sure to remind us what he thought of Mr. Trump, by whom he asked to attend and to speak, and by what they said. There was the man he fought bitterly for the Republican presidential nomination in 2000.
If we're ever tempted to forget who we are, to grow weary of our cause, John's voice will always come as a whisper over our shoulder. We are better than this. America is better than this.
Then there was the man who defeated McCain for the presidency in 2008.
He did understand that some principles transcend politics, that some values transcend party. He considered it part of his duty to uphold those principles and uphold those values.
But more than anything or anyone else, there was McCain's daughter, Meghan. Fighting through tears, she delivered a 1-2 punch at the current occupant of the White House. Here was number 1.
We gather here to mourn the passing of American greatness. The real thing, not cheap rhetoric from men who will never come near the sacrifice he gave so willingly, nor the opportunistic appropriation of those who live lives of comfort and privilege while he suffered and served.
And then there was number 2.
America does not boast because she has no need to. The America of John McCain has no need to be made great again because America was always great.
President Trump was not invited. He spent part of the funeral tweeting, then left the White House during the funeral by motorcade en route to his Virginia club to play golf. When he turned in, Henry Kissinger was speaking, in case you're wondering. Later in the day, as cable TV played Meghan McCain's "America was always great" remark over and over, the president tweeted, then retweeted simply, "Make America great again," in all caps. We have a lot to get to this morning beyond the funeral, and joining me now is Republican Senator.
So, like I said, that was pretty good coverage. They showed the "Make America Great Again" tweet that seemed to be a response to Meghan McCain. I don't know if it was or not. And like I said, they did use the phrase Trump rebuked earlier in the news summary. The one criticism I had when I first saw it was that I don't think they showed like the most critical thing that Obama said about Trump. But then later, I'll show you when Chuck Todd asks a question of Senator Amy Klobuchar, he uses the Obama clip that I thought they should have used in the summary. So they did use it later in the show. Like I said, the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos summary, I thought put it all in the best context, and it's also significantly longer. It's about 2 minutes longer, right? Yeah, no, it's 1 minute and 20 seconds longer. And my only criticism. The only thing that makes it a little worse than the previous summary, like I said before, I showed both of them, is that you have to wait longer for the Trump rebuked line, and they start off with this, I don't know, is it emotional admonishment? That seems like a little bit wordy to me. You can let me know what you think after you watch this 3-minute, 55-second news summary from ABC this morning over here.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this Labor Day weekend. It was a remarkable scene here in Washington yesterday as mourners filled the National Cathedral to pay their respects to the late Senator John McCain, the kind of service normally reserved for presidents. All week, McCain's service's final message and the speakers he handpicked to eulogize him stood as an emotional admonishment of the partisan politics increasingly consuming this country. At times, as much a censure of Donald Trump as an embrace of an American hero.
I am here before you today saying the words I have never wanted to say, giving the speech I have never wanted to give, feeling the loss I have never wanted to feel. My father is gone.
But on Saturday, John McCain's voice was as clear and defiant as ever in the sentiments of his daughter, Meghan McCain.
We gather here to mourn the passing of American greatness. The real thing, not cheap rhetoric from men who will never come near the sacrifice he gave so willingly, nor the opportunistic appropriation of those who lived lives of comfort and privilege while he suffered and served.
From her father's service and sacrifice to his vision of our nation.
America does not boast because she has no need to. The America of John McCain has no need to be made great again because America was always great.
That speech only part of a week-long tribute that John McCain planned himself to showcase bipartisanship at its best.
Back in the day, he could frustrate me. And I know he'd say the same thing about me. But he also made me better.
Two former presidents, former rivals who defeated McCain in the political arena, lauding his legacy and his vision for the country.
So much of our politics, our public life, our public discourse can seem small and mean and petty. Trafficking in bombast and insult and phony controversies and manufactured outrage. John called on us to be bigger than that. He called on us to be better than that.
Another thinly veiled rebuke to the current occupant of the White House who had challenged McCain's heroism. Trump was not invited to any of this week's ceremonies. He spent Saturday at the golf course instead. Throughout the week, as leaders praised McCain for reaching across the aisle, Trump called out the Democrats.
Today's Democrat Party is held hostage by left-wing haters, angry mobs, deep state radicals, establishment cronies, and their fake news allies.
And while McCain's friends and family gathered this weekend to honor a war hero, Trump was tweeting about NAFTA, the Department of Justice, the FBI. Now, as this Labor Day weekend marks the critical final stretch before Election Day, the president's words and actions will be hovering over the ballot. According to our new ABC News Washington Post poll, 60% of Americans disapprove of Trump's performance in office, a new high, and nearly half of Americans support Congress initiating impeachment proceedings against Trump. Here to discuss McCain's legacy and how it stands in.
So, yeah, I thought that was a great news summary. I like, of course, the ABC Washington Post poll results. I think I saw someone before I started the show talking about that in the live comments, that Trump's approval is at a record 60%, which does not bode well for the blue wave that may or may not be coming. Well, I mean, at least to some extent seems to be coming, and that, like I said, the last two clips I'll show you will be one of the most recent crests of the blue wave, this progressive Florida candidate, Andrew Gillum. But I also thought that the Obama clip there was a little bit cut up. one of the shortest news summaries, well, second shortest, I guess, compared to the next one I'm going to show you from CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash. But Face the Nation did like the worst job of covering the whole Trump rebuked and the funeral and all that stuff. But they actually showed the longest Obama clip. That'll be the clip after next. But first I want to show you Dana Bash on the State of the Union, where the State of the Union is saying goodbye, but it really should be Trump rebuked. And they say Trump rebuked in the that it was unmistakably rebuked, and they show Obama and George W. Bush clips and the swipes, the oblique swipes or whatever. And like the last two clips, they all mention that Trump was playing golf. I don't know, is that media bias, or is that good reporting? Is that like an important fact that we all need to know? He was playing golf during the funeral. You saw it in the last two clips. You will see it in this clip as well. A minute and 17 seconds from CNN State of the Union this morning here.
I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is saying goodbye. It was a final salute to the country he served and an unmistakable rebuke to President Trump. Two former presidents, once bitter rivals, offering their memories of Senator John McCain and lamenting the current state of politics.
It's a politics that pretends to be brave and tough, but in fact is born of fear.
John's voice will always come as a whisper over our shoulder. We are better than this. America is better than this.
Veiled swipes at the man not in the room, the man not invited, President Donald Trump. As dignitaries gathered to mourn Senator McCain, the president spent his morning attacking his rivals on Twitter and golfing at his nearby resort. The show of unity barely masking the deep divisions, setting the stage for the Labor Day kickoff of what is already a brutal midterm election season. A clash of political extremes is on full display in the battle for governor in Florida. A Trump-backed Republican, Ron DeSantis, versus a Bernie Sanders-backed Democrat, Andrew Gillum, fighting for control of the ultimate swing state. And joining me now is the Democratic nominee for...
And like I said, I will have a clip from that Andrew Gillum interview from Dana Bash that was actually criticized on AM Joy for Dana Bash creating this false dichotomy, or this calling Andrew Gillum more extreme than he is, but that'll be a little bit later. But like I said, that was somewhere in the middle in terms of the news summaries. This next news summary from CBS's Face the Nation, like I said, Face the Nation did the worst job of covering my topic for the day, mainly because they had on the Republican governor of Ohio, John Kasich, who talked. I didn't take a clip from him. And then they had this extremely long interview with former senator, former presidential candidate, former Secretary of State John Kerry. And it was recorded earlier in the summer, they said. I think it might have been months ago. And they were only playing it now because John Kerry has a book out that Margaret Brennan later admitted, Simon & Schuster, which is owned by the same company as CBS, they're like putting the book out. And I also saw this news story that John Kerry might be running for president again, or won't rule out a run for president in 2020, which sounds like another good scheme for book selling. So that was my big criticism of CBS's Face the Nation. But at least, like I said, in this 90-second clip I'm about to show you, I think they have the most extended Obama clip. So at least you got to give them that in the one Face the Nation clip I'm showing you. And it's also at least better than the Fox News summary I'm going to show you from Fox News Sunday as the final news summary after the Face the Nation news summary that we can watch together here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Thousands turned out at Washington National Cathedral yesterday to honor John McCain. Those who eulogized him rebuked the politics of today's political climate and remembered McCain as one who aspired to do better.
We gather here to mourn the passing of American greatness. The real thing, not cheap rhetoric from men who will never come near the sacrifice he gave so willingly, nor the opportunistic appropriation of those who live lives of comfort and privilege while he suffered and served.
So much of our politics, our public life, our public discourse can seem small and mean and petty. Trafficking in bombast and insult and phony controversies and manufactured outrage. It's a politics that pretends to be brave and tough, but in fact is born of fear. John called on us to be bigger than that. He called on us to be better than that.
One of the attendees at Saturday's memorial service for John McCain here in Washington was Ohio Republican Governor John Kasich.
So you could see John Kasich and then John Kerry. Maybe they'll both be running for president in 2020, and Face the Nation will be correct to have put all this focus on them this week. But did you hear that part of the Obama criticism of Trump and Trumpism that you didn't hear in the previous clips? The part about it pretends to be strong and brave, but really comes from fear. That is like the most important part, and that's the one thing I have to say. Thank you, Face the Nation, for including that part. The entire Obama speech is worth watching. You know, you can find it many places on YouTube. I thought of actually showing an extended clip. Even the George W. Bush speech was okay, but the Obama speech, I don't know, maybe I just miss having a, reasonable president who, well, I think you do know what I mean by that. And before I finish the news summaries and I get to Lindsey Graham and Joe Lieberman and Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin and the Andrew Gillum clips, and one Senator Amy Klobuchar, those are all the newsmaker clips. I have one more news summary. This is Fox News Sunday. And both from this news summary and also from the question I'm going to show later, or right afterwards, of Chris Wallace talking to Lindsey Graham, they're almost trying to take a neutral position. I've talked about how the people at the funeral rebuked Trump, and they're sort of like, are we on the rebuker's side or are we on Trump's side? And if you watch the news summary closely, they do sort of report on the rebuking. They don't use the word rebuke, but they talk about the Meghan McCain. They show Barack Obama, but they don't show George W. Bush being critical. And this is the only one that actually shows Henry Kissinger. I don't know. It's almost like an alternate universe view, as Fox News often is. And I'll discuss it a little more with you after we watch the 2.5-minute Fox News Sunday news summary, starting with Chris Wallace and then going over to Peter Doocy, their reporter on this issue. He's the son of Steve Doocy of Fox and Friends fame. This, I guess, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree or chip off the old block, or you can let me know what cliche you want to use about Peter Doocy and Steve Doocy when we watch this clip together over here.
Hello again from Fox News in Washington. The big story this week is confirmation hearings for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, President Trump's Supreme Court nominee who could shift the balance of power on the court for a generation. Kavanaugh faces days of tough questioning from the Senate Judiciary Committee. In a moment, we'll speak with two leading members of that panel. But first, the nation's long goodbye to Senator John McCain. McCain will be laid to rest today in a private ceremony at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, which meant so much to him. Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy reports on a very public farewell yesterday in Washington.
Oh, Daddy boy, oh, Daddy boy, I love you so.
Lawmakers, loved ones, and diplomats gathered Saturday for a final goodbye to Senator John McCain.
The world will be lonelier without John McCain.
One of McCain's best friends, former Senator Joe Lieberman, told mourners about the time McCain asked him to join the GOP ticket, even though he was a registered Democrat.
John's response was direct and really ennobling. That's the point, Joe, he said with a certain impatience. You're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. We could give our country the bipartisan leadership it needs for a change.
McCain's former political rivals spoke on his behalf, too.
In recent years, we sometimes talk of that intense period like football players. remembering a big game. In the process, rivalry melted away.
So much of our politics, our public life, our public discourse can seem small and mean and petty. John called on us to be bigger than that.
McCain's daughter Meghan broke from her tear-filled tribute to more sharply criticize the current president, who wasn't invited.
The America of John McCain has no need to be made great again because America was always great.
And joining me now here in Washington, John McCain's good friend, Senator Lindsey Graham.
And I'm going to show a clip of that interview with Lindsey Graham. The first question to Lindsey Graham actually right there is kind of a softball. Like, you know, how are you feeling? How you doing? You know, because, of course, Lindsey Graham was kind of like John McCain's work husband in the Senate, or I guess they had the whole Three Amigos thing with Lindsey Graham and Joe Lieberman, who's not a senator anymore, but I'm going to show a clip of him with Lindsey Graham and a clip from CNN's State of the Union, with Dan Abash, and just in the clip after next. But first, I think, like I said before I showed that news summary, you would probably agree that it's much more muted in terms of the rebuke of Trump. The word rebuke didn't show up there, though it did show up like 40 minutes into the program when they, you know, in the panel there was the funeral a rebuke of Trump. But it seemed to be catering also to some of the people on the right wing I saw on Twitter during the funeral who were like saying, oh, this is unseemly that they're criticizing Trump, although they never said Trump, but it was pretty clear what they were criticizing. It was unseemly. They were criticizing Trump at a funeral. But where were all those Trump supporters when Trump was like criticizing John McCain for being a war prisoner or a prisoner of war? I like people who weren't captured. And then when he even continued to criticize him on the campaign trail when John McCain was dying of brain cancer. So I think their unseemliness sensitivity came a little bit late. And in this next clip, you'll see Chris Wallace follows up a little bit on this rebuke of Trump, asking Lindsey Graham about what Meghan McCain said, attacking obliquely Donald Trump. And you'll see Lindsey Graham's answer is, and this is kind of the neutrality I was talking about before, where Fox News is like, if you're one of those people criticizing the McCain funeral for attacking Trump, you are welcome at Fox News. This editorial position in that last clip and this next clip will make you entirely comfortable and you'll see Lindsey Graham saying, well, you know, Meghan McCain, her father was attacked and she was in grief, so it's okay to say things that might not be entirely positive about our dear leader or, you know, about Trump, whatever. And I don't know why it is Lindsey Graham seems to have, he used to be a critic of Trump, and now it's almost like Trump or somebody has something on Lindsey Graham so that he can't criticize Trump anymore. And that's kind of evident in this clip, which also you'll notice that the first thing Lindsey Graham says, I don't know whether this interview came before or after the State of the Union interview, but it seems like Lindsey Graham is saying the same thing that Joe Lieberman says in the next clip, but I'll talk about that more after we watch this 2-minute clip from Fox News Sunday this morning together here.
About the passionate, heartfelt, but sometimes angry tribute by Meghan McCain, who took some pretty clear shots at President Trump. Here's a clip.
We gather here to mourn the passing of American greatness. The real thing, not cheap rhetoric from men who will never come near the sacrifice he gave so willingly, nor the opportunistic appropriation of those who lived lives of comfort and privilege while he suffered and served.
Was that appropriate? Was it fair?
If you say something bad about Meghan's father, you will know it. She didn't like it, so it's okay. She's grieving. All I can say is there's a lesson to be learned this week about John McCain. Number one, Americans appreciate military service. If you've learned nothing this week, you know the fact that John served our country in extraordinary circumstances was appreciated by everybody. What else do we know? That if you work hard and do your homework and know what you're talking about, people will listen to you. That if you pick big causes, bigger than yourself, you'll be remembered. He tried to drain the swamp before it was cool. That you can fight hard and still be respected. If you forgive, people appreciate it. And if you admit to mistakes, you're looked at as a stronger man. That's the formula of John McCain. This was a civics lesson for anybody who wanted to listen. Why do we remember this man? Because of the way he conducted his public life.
And do you think there's a lesson there for President Trump?
There's a lesson here for everybody, including President Trump. Everybody makes mistakes. Those who admit it are seen by the public as bigger, not smaller. Know what you're talking about. Fight hard, forgive, and have passion. Strength and kindness are not mutually exclusive.
Let's turn to your day job.
So it wasn't aimed at Donald Trump, according to the spin from Lindsey Graham and Fox News and those last two clips. It was actually something that targeted at everybody. It wasn't a rebuke of Trump, rebuke of everybody. We should all be less partisan. It's not something especially Trump did, and we can forgive Meghan McCain for making it sound like she was criticizing Trump because she's grieving, and he and her father was attacked in ways that we won't talk about in any way on Fox News at all. Although actually very few of the corporate news media have brought up, like, They should be showing that clip of, I like people who weren't captured. That they should be playing that over and over and over again during the same time they show these as like support for why it is that Trump is being rebuked by people on the right and the left. I guess you could call it the establishment was rebuking Trump in some way. Maybe that's why the Fox News is trying to be anti-establishment. I don't know. And so I also thought, well, anyway, maybe I'll talk about that a little later, but I want to talk about this next clip, which is another Lindsey Graham clip, but it includes Joe Lieberman, who used to be a senator. I'm actually really familiar with Joe Lieberman. I think I've occasionally talked about how I have a history degree from Yale, and I did my senior essay actually on the attempt at international control of atomic weapons at the end of World War II. And Joe Lieberman wrote a whole book on basically that topic when he was at Yale, or a graduate student at Yale. And when I was at Yale, he also ran for senator the first time from Connecticut. He was senator from Connecticut. His book on that same topic was called The Scorpion and the Tarantula. That was the main title, and then there was some, I can't remember the subtitle anymore, but it had to do with the attempt at international control of atomic weapons at the end of World War II. That's what I wrote my senior essay to get my history degree at Yale about, and that's one of the resources I draw on to give my political commentary at this time, many years later. So I do have a long familiarity with Joe Lieberman going back to the 1980s when he was first running as a Democratic senator, but to the right of the Republican senator whose name is now escaping me. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. But this is Lindsey Graham and Joe Lieberman talking to Dana Bash about the same topic about the rebuke, and being a little more honest than I think you saw on Fox News Sunday. And then at the end of this clip, you'll see Dana Bash clear up this news story that Lindsey Graham was responsible for getting Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner at the McCain funeral. You saw that in the Fox News summary. They showed a screenshot of Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump at the funeral. And it seems like Lindsey Graham is saying, no, he's not responsible. But if you listen carefully, and I've watched this clip a couple times, it sounds kind of like he relayed things that Ivanka Trump said about McCain to the McCain family, which somehow caused them to invite Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Listen carefully, and I think you will agree that's kind of what Lindsey Graham is saying at the end of this clip, which starts off talking about the rebuke of Trump by Meghan McCain, and Lindsey Graham and Joe Lieberman both respond to that over here.
Posted a photo this weekend of you. I'm sure you've both seen it. And if you can put it up, she called you, quote, my uncles forever, because certainly that is how she feels about you. I want you, again with our viewers, to listen to how Meghan McCain remembered her father yesterday at the National Cathedral.
We gather here to mourn the passing of American greatness. The real thing, not cheap rhetoric from men who will never come near the sacrifice he gave so willingly, nor the opportunistic appropriation of those who live lives of comfort and privilege while he suffered and served. The America of John McCain has no need to be made great again because America was always great.
I was in the cathedral yesterday. There was a bit of shock that she went there like she did so directly. He wasn't invited, Donald Trump. Instead, he went golfing. What's your reaction, each of you, to that clip and to the, what was it at the time, to those words?
Well, number one, she's a beautiful, talented young lady. She is her father's daughter. If you say something bad about her dad, you will know it. Whether you're the janitor or the President of the United States, she is grieving for the father she adored. And I think most Americans understand that, and I am just so proud of the young lady she has become. So I'm totally okay with everything.
Here, here. Well, I appreciate that she said a picture of her uncles, because I feel like her uncle, and my wife, that's what feels like her aunt. She's in New York. We get to see her some. We love her, really.
Yes.
Yesterday, I was a very proud uncle, because to say the obvious, Meghan is a daughter who had a very special, close relationship with her father, John McCain. So he's gone, he's died. She's grieving, and yet by the nature of his life, she's called on to make a very public, global statement, appearance, very hard. But she did it, and she did it magnificently, and she did it the way her dad would want her to do it. And you know what? She didn't. She was direct with the way John was. And you know, sometimes those around you are even more direct than you would be in a given situation.
That's a very good point.
So God bless her.
I was at the funeral, as I mentioned yesterday. When I saw Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, I was kind of surprised. I didn't know that they were on the invite list. It turns out, Senator Graham, you were behind that?
No.
You were not behind
Nobody was at that funeral, did not get invited by the family.
Okay.
Earlier in the week, I met with Ivanka about a trip we're planning in Africa. Ivanka said some very nice things about Senator McCain after his passing. It was not unnoticed by the family. If you wanted to invite everybody that loved John McCain, you could have filled up Yankee Stadium. I'm hoping that Cindy, who has done terrific work for human trafficking of women and all things related to that issue, can work with Ivanka and others, because that's her life's work, and maybe these two can work together to help women who are in desperate straits. I think both of them would like to do that, and I'd like to help to the extent I could.
Were you happy that they were?
So there's Lindsey Graham telling you that no, he's not responsible, but it almost sounds like he was responsible for Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner being at that funeral there, because did it sound like he may have passed on nice things that Ivanka said to the McCain family so that they then invited them? He said, no, I didn't do it because no one was there who wasn't invited by the McCain family, but that doesn't really say that he didn't facilitate it. So you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I made a mistake earlier where I said that Lindsey Graham was using something Joe Lieberman said in the previous clip, and actually he said the same thing in both clips about, she reacted as a daughter. So I guess that was a mistake I made. I know some people drink when I make mistakes, so if you're watching as a live viewer, this is your cue. But the one thing I thought Joe Lieberman pointed out in that clip that I also, having watched the funeral live, when I watched Meghan McCain's speech, they showed a couple clips. You saw a bunch of clips of the Meghan McCain speech, but if you watch the whole thing, and it's available on YouTube, I'm sure, from various different provider or channels, but She had to stop speaking many times during the speech to sort of like cry a little bit or sniffle, or I mean, it was obviously very emotionally stressful for her, and I can't imagine giving that kind of speech at a parent's funeral, although that's not something I have ever experienced. So personally, but just imagining, I can't imagine doing what she did in such an emotionally stressful situation, and Joe Lieberman pointed that out in the previous clip, and so I thought that was something important to highlight that wasn't in any of the other clips. And the next two clips I want to show, well, there's one more Republican reacting to the rebuke of Donald Trump, and this is kind of a more political rebuke, and then I have a Democrat, Amy Klobuchar, in the final clip on sort of the rebuke of Donald Trump topic before the last two Andrew Gillum clips, and of course the bonus Sandy and Dash clip that I promised the Sandy and Dash fans. But for the Ron Johnson of Wisconsin clip, this is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz is doubling down on those poll numbers that I showed you. That is pretty devastating if those poll numbers are accurate and they hold true through the midterm elections, basically 60 days from now, then the Republicans are going to be toast, because a president with 60% disapproval, that is, what are Republicans going to do about that in the midterms? And that's the question that Martha Raddatz asks Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. That's a swing state, so he's got to know how to deal with the swing problems. And he talks about, well, we got to talk about all the good things Trump is doing, including business investment. But the business investment he's talking about is like the big corporate tax cut that went into stock buybacks. I'm almost positive that that is what accounts for the statistics he's going to use in this next clip. And that means that basically corporate shareholders are getting richer. That's not really anything good for workers or the economy, but you'll hear Ron Johnson talk about it a couple times, talking to Martha Raddatz, trying to explain what Republicans should do for their very, very unpopular president in this clip.
The president does loom large over the midterms, and our new ABC News Washington Post poll finds that the president's disapproval rating has hit an all-time high at 60%, and nearly half of Americans, 49%, say Congress should begin impeachment proceedings against President Trump, including 51% of moderates. How do Republican candidates overcome the cloud of investigations that hang over the president, especially in a key swing state like yours?
Well, I think we should point out the reality of all the good things this administration has done. We stopped adding to the regulatory burden. We have a more competitive tax system. In just the first 6 quarters of this administration, business investment has increased 7.3% on average. The last 2 years under Obama, it only increased 0.6%. It's that business investment that will, I think, lay the foundation for strong economic progress, more prosperity, better opportunities for every American. So we've done a lot of good things. We've appointed and confirmed judges.
But let's go back to that poll, Senator. Go back to that poll and those really tough numbers.
Well, listen, if I believed in polls, I wouldn't have even run in 2016. So I'm not a big believer in the polls. There's only one poll that counts. It's on Election Day, and we'll see really the verdict of the American public. But over the next 2 months, Republicans just had to point out the success, and it's been an astonishing success. 4.1% growth in just the last quarter. And again, we've laid the foundation. That the main number there is really the 7.3% increase in the first 6 quarters of business investment. It's an extraordinary accomplishment because we're starting to get government out of the way of the private sector. That's how you create opportunity and prosperity for Americans. So we've got a great record.
We can see how those campaigns are going to go.
Focus on.
Okay, thanks, Senator Johnson. I want to move to the confirmation hearings for Brett.
And you'll see I did not show the rest of that clip where Martha Raddatz asked about the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, which there'll be hearings this week. you saw in the Fox News Sunday News Summary I showed earlier, they led with that as the top story. I don't know if the upcoming hearings are the top story, but I assume that's probably going to be the top story next weekend, when I may have a delayed edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. I'll talk about that a little more at the end as to why next Sunday may even get delayed till next Monday, or Monday after next, I guess. That happens occasionally, and like I said, at the end I'll talk about that. But before I finish up with the Trump rebuke clips and get to the last two Andrew Gillum clips, I want to show a Democrat, at least, reacting to the rebuke of Donald Trump by Meghan McCain, or no, not by Meghan McCain. This is the rebuke of Donald Trump by Barack Obama. Remember when I showed the NBC Meet the Press clip, I said that Chuck Todd in that introduction didn't show enough of the Obama criticism of Trump. Well, here's a little more of that Obama criticism of Trump as part of Chuck Todd's questioning of Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, and asking about the rebuke of Trump by Senator McCain's eulogizers over in this clip.
Earlier, there was a sense at the National Cathedral yesterday that with the loss of John McCain came the loss of a certain civility in our politics. President Obama, among others, made that point.
So much of our politics, our public life, our public discourse can seem small and mean and petty. Trafficking in bombast and insult and phony controversies and manufactured outrage. It's a politics that pretends to be brave and tough, but in fact is born of fear.
Joining me now from the other side of the aisle, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota.
Thanks,
Senator,
Chuck.
nice to see you. What did you take away from yesterday, and did you see it as a rebuke of President Trump?
I saw it as the story of John McCain, his grieving family, a grieving nation, people who he had run against, people who had defeated him. He invited them in. And I think it is no surprise that the subject of the administration came up obliquely from time to time. But I think that George Bush actually said it best to explain it. He said that John McCain's life was defined in part by the fact that he detested the abuse of power, whether that was people who poisoned political opponents or put reporters in jail, or yes, people who would take on immigrants in a way that he thought was inappropriate, like the president has done, or people who would go after FBI agents or POWs like himself. So yes, that was part of John McCain's strength and character, that he was willing to stand up and take on bullies. And so I think that is how you saw it come up, but it was really a part of the arc of his life and fighting for those that needed someone to fight for them.
Some of us viewed this week.
So that was a very diplomatic response, I guess, to the question about the rebuke of Donald Trump, and from a Democrat, but it was more straightforward than what you saw from Ron Johnson of Wisconsin in the previous clip. And so that actually gets me, though, to the final two rebuke of Donald Trump clips, which aren't about the funeral, but are about the coming blue wave and the latest crest in the blue wave, the progressive Democrat, the mayor of Tallahassee, Florida, Andrew Gillum, who won the primary in Florida this last week and is now going to take on this guy, Ron DeSantis, who ran himself as like the Trump mini-me. He put together this whole ad where he was like teaching his infant daughter to read or to speak by saying, make America great again. And he had like this whole, like, I don't even want to try to describe. It was just, he tried to make himself the Trump candidate, definitely. And then right after both of them won their primaries, he made this comment, both calling Andrew Gillum articulate and also, which is a code word that I talked about from the comedy clip, which I may replay after this next clip, because you're going to see what Ron DeSantis said, both about him being articulate and then about not monkeying up the Florida economy or whatever. And actually, if you look at the link down in the video description and read the my notes for my clip list here, if you try to put notes about Ron DeSantis calling Andrew Gillum articulate and monkeying up the Florida economy, you end up with Arctic Monkey. That's actually a band, Arctic Monkey, but it's actually Arctic Monkey, not Arctica, but Arctic, because it's an abbreviation for articulate. So Arctic Monkey is, if you read this is a clip 11, Chuck intro, upset DeSantis, Arctic Monkey clip. Oh, and Nazis. He talks about there's also been Nazi robocalls already in Florida in favor of Ron DeSantis and against Andrew Gillum. That comes up in this, actually this is a 3.5-minute clip that Chuck Todd actually follows up and points out that Andrew Gillum won't call Ron DeSantis a racist, although he won't say he's not a racist, he just won't call him a racist. And anyway, I'll talk about all of it with you after we watch that 3.5-minute, or actually 3-minute 34-second clip together over here.
Welcome back. We saw another huge upset in a Democratic primary on Tuesday night, this time in the state of Florida. Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum defied the polling to win his party's nomination. Gillum is an unapologetic progressive, and he's up against a similarly unapologetic Trump supporter, Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis. It's base against base. The race has national implications. Will help determine whether it is safe for the two parties to so-called abandon the middle and appeal primarily to firing up their bases. On day one of the campaign, DeSantis said this.
He is an articulate spokesman for those far-left views, and he's a charismatic candidate. The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist agenda with huge tax increases and bankrupting the state.
DeSantis and his campaign insist that the use of the words articulate and monkey this up had no racial connotations. Gillum says DeSantis is employing Trump-style politics. Quote, they no longer do whistle calls, they're now using full bullhorns, is what he said. Well, joining me now is the Democratic nominee, Andrew Gillum. And by the way, for viewers, we did invite Congressman DeSantis to appear this morning. Second invitation we've offered on various programs, but he declined again. Mayor Gillum, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thank you so much for having me, Chuck. And I just want to quickly say that yesterday's display of true patriotism was something to behold in today's America. I was inspiring, and all of the speeches really moved me personally.
Thank you for sharing that. Let me start with the start of this campaign. You had that back and forth with your opponent. A neo-Nazi group launched some really ugly robocalls. I don't even want to give the name of the group or anything because they're just, I think, just trying to get free publicity here. Are you satisfied with how quickly Republicans shot down that neo-Nazi call? And does that reassure you that they don't want to make race an issue in this campaign?
Well, I mean, I think what's important is that Mr. DeSantis and obviously the president really try to go high on this thing. We cannot afford to weaponize race and to go to the bottom of the barrel here. And honestly, people are going to take their cues from what their leadership says. And in this case, Ron DeSantis is the leader. And therefore, he's got to be very, very careful about how he addresses these kinds of issues. I'm pleased to see them decry those robocalls. But it's also important that Ron DeSantis take control and ownership of his own rhetoric and words. Because we already know that given the highly sensitive nature we now find ourselves, that people take their cues and sometimes they act out in ways that go far beyond what is appropriate in today's environment.
You do not think Congressman DeSantis is a racist, do you?
I have not called him a racist.
I know you haven't.
What I simply said was that his his rhetoric, in my opinion, has to be toned down. That what I will call him is someone who has worked to undermine the healthcare system, someone who has decided to join with Donald Trump in giving more and more money away to the largest and wealthiest corporations and less to regular, everyday working people. I'm happy to debate him on the merits of public policy. I am not going to get into the gutter and name call. That's not what Florida voters are interested in, and certainly that's not why I ran for governor. I'm here to talk about the issues that confront the people of our great state.
You ran as an unabashed.
So that was pretty good deflection there, pretty good pivot to the issues he really wanted to talk about. Though, if you listen carefully, when Andrew Gillum, he said, you know, you don't think, the question was, you don't think that Ron DeSantis is racist? And his answer was, well, I have not called him a racist. That doesn't mean he's not a racist. And I don't know, the articulate thing and the monkey it up thing, I think that must have been calculated by Ron DeSantis. I mean, if it were one or the other, because, you know, calling someone like articulate or clean, or, you know, he presents himself so well. And in fact, I'm going to replay for you all the 41-second clip that I showed at the very beginning, since you just saw what Ron DeSantis actually said. Here is, again, Michael Steele and Joy Reid this morning creating a little stand-up comedy out of the articulate monkey it up, with kind of sad state of affairs of Florida politics. But anyway, here's that 41-second clip I showed at the beginning again, in the context of having seen what Ron DeSantis actually said over here.
I'm going to give honorific to Chairman Steele. Your thoughts on this Gillum campaign and this kind of trite narrative that, you know, to be fair, your party, as well as my profession, the media, are putting on top of him.
Well, he's just so articulate, and I'm just so damn impressed by that. And he presents so well. And
yeah.
Gosh, he had a tie on and everything. Damn. Black man in a tie. Look at this brother here, right? All right. Anyway, so. Okay.
Put up, tip your waiters. Always get count on. That's why I went to you first, brother. I knew you were gonna come with it. Yeah.
Well, you know, look.
And the one thing I can add that I was a little far away when I showed that clip at the beginning, at the very beginning of that clip, you hear Joy Reid talking about the trite narrative. And the trite narrative is that Andrew Gillum is like this extreme socialist, and there's like this conflict in the Democratic Party, and his views are so extreme. And actually, there's a point in that AM Joy show where they talk about his issues, you know, Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, that, I mean, those aren't really extremes in Florida. And they actually criticize, among other people, Dana Bash, and show an abbreviated version of this last clip I'm going to show you here before the bonus Sandy and Dash clip. And they criticize Dana Bash for sort of setting up this false trite narrative, putting Andrew Gillum in this, you know, democratic socialist box, you know, this extreme left-winger, when all the policies he's talking about are, you know, mainstream policies. And I talked about democratic socialism when I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primaries, and how democratic socialism isn't really socialism. It's really just like the social safety net that most people in a mixed capitalist system believe in. Because socialism, classic socialism, is the government or group ownership of the means of production. And unless, you know, that's like maybe Amtrak is socialism, where like the government owns the railroad, but you know, just social safety net programs where the government provides certain services, or Medicare where they like pay for your health care, but they don't own the doctors, they don't own the hospitals. So I mean, that would be socialism to some extent, like single payer where the government owns the hospitals and employs the doctors. That might be socialism, although that's sort of a very vague definition of the means of production. It's more like where they own the factories, they own the businesses, they employ everybody gets their check from the government. That's socialism. Democratic socialism is just like, you know, health care, if you pay, free health care funded by people's taxes, free universities, unemployment insurance, maternal and paternal child care leave paid for by the government, that kind of thing. That's not really socialism, but that's democratic socialism, and that's Andrew Gillum, and that's sort of the false dichotomy set up by Dana Bash, criticized by Joy Reid and her panel, but here's what the sort of extended version, and whether Dana Bash is really setting up a false narrative. You can let me know what you think after we watch this last news clip before the bonus Sandy and Dash clip at the end together over here.
Himself putting you in the spotlight and your race, of course, describing you this way in a tweet. A failed socialist mayor named Andrew Gillum, who has allowed crime and many other problems to flourish in this city. This is not what Florida wants or needs. You're now in a general election in a state that Trump won. You ran pretty far to the left in the primary race. In order to be governor, you need to win voters in the middle. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, well, Dana, let me first say how extremely proud I was yesterday watching Senator McCain's funeral. The comments from his daughter, Megan, from the president, all the former presidents, really was a display of really who we are as a country. Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump are at the far other extremes of what we want, not only as a country, but as a state. And I'll tell you, I don't believe that any of the issues that I stood on in the primary are in any way disqualifying in this general election. We're going to win this race because the people of my state are interested in having an education system that their kids can get a good quality education. And right now we rank 40th out of 50th in quality. The people in my state want access to good and affordable and accessible health care. They want to see teachers paid what they're worth.
And I want to get to a lot of those issues and dig deeper on them in just a moment. Before, though, I have to get this out of the way.
And actually, Dana Bash asked Andrew Gillum the same question about, the racism and the robocalls from the Nazi white supremacists. And that's obviously going to be an issue in the Florida election, unfortunately. But I don't know, is that sort of a false, putting Andrew Gillum falsely as an extreme socialist when he doesn't really believe in anything that's socialist? I saw in the live comments people talking about social security like old age pensions, also not government ownership of the means of production. So it's not classic socialism, but it's part of democratic socialism, the mixed capitalistic system that has some sort of social safety net for people who are poor or just above the poverty level, or who are old and retired, so that they have enough resources to not be homeless, to get health care, to not starve, to have home heating. These are all like programs that are democratic socialism, but not really socialism. So anyway, that was the final news clip. And also, I've been reading the live viewer comments along the way. I especially appreciate those who gave me these super chat contributions. So there were a bunch of comments there. I saw Chris Lapaco give an entry into the Steve Doocy, Peter Doocy contest, saying that it's the apple doesn't fall far from the horse. I guess they both kind of have horsey faces, so I can understand why that's kind of a good entry. But you can all let me know what you think down in the comment section. Give additional entries for what cliche describes Steve Doocy and Peter Doocy of Fox News. And anyway, I appreciate those super chat contributions because they definitely supplement the very small amount of YouTube advertising income that I get most recently. And of course, my patrons on Patreon are my big supporters. That is actually, I'd say, almost 3/4 of the income I get per year for doing this every Sunday and picking out all the best clips from the Big Five corporate outlets. And although I occasionally can't do it on Sundays, I've get delayed to a Monday. Next weekend, I told you about this earlier in the show. I am, at the very beginning of the show, I have an introduction. When I do the titles at the beginning, the LiberalViewer presents that voice. That's my daughter, who has now graduated high school, and I'm going to be taking her off to a gap year program that she has to arrive at next Saturday with her parents, and it's like a 14-hour drive away and a 14-hour drive back, so I will most likely not be arriving back home till sometime late on Sunday, maybe. It's hard to say. It depends on a lot of variables, but it's quite likely this is one of those few times that LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup will be delayed to sometime on Monday, a week from tomorrow. And I really want to talk about the Brett Kavanaugh hearings that are coming up, especially because I figured out that Brett Kavanaugh started Yale in my residential college, which is sort of like there are like 10 or I don't know, there might be 12 residential colleges now, but I think there were 10 when I went to Yale. And so the freshmen are like all live in these dorms on old campus, and Brett Kavanaugh was apparently in the same entering Ezra Stiles college class that I was in. I have he looks vaguely familiar. I don't have any specific memories, but he's very Catholic, and my freshman roommate was also very Catholic, is now a Catholic priest, and I think I may have seen them together. So I actually don't have anything specific to say about Brett Kavanaugh from that fairly close relationship back in the 1980s, but I do know sort of the ilk from which he comes, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about what he says and give my legal analysis of what happens in the hearings. I've been trying to make videos in the middle of the week. I made a Fox News bias video. You can see a link for that down in the video description, but I probably won't have time this week because of these family obligations. But after I get back from, I guess, no longer being a stay-at-home dad, I probably will have more time to make YouTube videos for the next several months, or the next year, really, with some vacations in there. But anyway, I did promise a Sandy and Dash clip. I have Sandy's right there. I don't know if she's sleeping. Sometimes you can hear her snoring, but I took a video of Sandy snoring and twitching, and then a brief Sandy Dash interaction for the final clip before I end the show over here. So you saw a little brief Dash and Sandy before the show, and that much longer snoring and twitching clip of Sandy from a little earlier in the day. I hope my show didn't leave any of you snoring and twitching, but that's the last clip. Thanks for joining me. I saw I got at least one more Super Chat contribution from Andy there at the end, so thanks to all those supporters. Thanks to all of you who just give me a thumbs up or a supportive comment in the live comments for the live show or for my recorded viewers. I appreciate all of you. I will be back next week, delayed as I said, and for every Sunday for the foreseeable future through the Trump impeachment or whatever may be the result of the possible hopeful. I'm really hoping for some sort of blue wave in November that will lead to more accountability than we have for this out-of-control presidency. You can hope with me or tell me why you think I'm wrong down in the comment section. Until next week, or until whatever happens that causes me to come back on YouTube, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.